All right, so our last video of the year is about ecosystems. Okay? An ecosystem is a community of organisms and its non-living environment, and we'll explain what that means. Okay? There are different types of ecosystems all over the world. So there are deserts, there are coastal areas, there are jungles, tundra, prairies, all kinds of different ecosystems in different areas around the world. Even in the United States, there are different ecosystems. Okay? An ecosystem is made up of biotic and abiotic factors. Biotic, so remember that B-I-O, bio, means living. So these are the living parts. Biotic factors are the living parts of an ecosystem. So this is anything in that area, in that environment that is alive. Okay? Abiotic, remember if you add the letter A to the front of a word, it means not or the opposite of. So this means not living. So abiotic, not living. Abiotic factors are the non-living parts of an ecosystem. So anything in that environment that is not alive or is no longer alive. So abiotic could mean was never alive, like a rock, or it could mean is no longer alive, like a deceased, a dead animal, or a tree that's fallen over, or something that's no longer alive. It could mean that too. So let's get some examples of biotic and abiotic. So I decided to look at a coastal, like a beach ecosystem, and what might be found in that area, specifically probably along like the Gulf of Mexico, so Corpus Christi, Houston, Galveston, maybe down in that area. Okay. So biotic, the living factors of this beach ecosystem could include tiger sharks, palm trees, seagulls, crabs, seaweed, mosquitoes, bacteria, etc. So there could be a lot more living parts of this ecosystem. This is just kind of what I wrote down. So these are all living parts of an ecosystem, which are called biotic factors. So abiotic, so non-living factors, could include sand, water, so like the water in the ocean, the air by the sea level. There's a lot of oxygen in the air, so it's very oxygen-rich air that the organisms are able to have. The temperature could be very warm. Wind, it's sometimes very windy on the coast. The humidity, which is the amount of water that the air is holding. So by the coast, it's usually very humid, so the air holds a lot of water. That could be important. Seashells, there could be glass or maybe sticks that are found on the beach that are washed up. Those could be abiotic factors, non-living parts as well. This next part is really important to understand. Both the biotic, the living, and abiotic, non-living factors can affect each other. The organisms that are found there interact with their environment, with the other organisms, with the non-living parts, and they affect everything. Everything affects everything else. Okay? So a good example about how the non-living affects the living in this ecosystem is that the water that's found in the ocean provides the home or the habitat for the tiger sharks. So if there was no water at that beach, the tiger shark would not live there. It would live somewhere else. So that water provides a place for the tiger shark to be. And also perhaps the temperature. If it gets too hot, the seagulls may only come out during certain parts of the day. They may wait until the evening or the morning to try to find their food, then try and do it during the middle of the day when it's as hot, when it's the hottest part of the day. So that could affect their behavior. The wind could definitely affect the seagulls and the mosquitoes. If it's too windy, it'd be harder for them to fly. Things like that. The sand provides the crab a place to hang out. It also, the crabs will dig through and try to find their food, like down in the sand. So the sand can affect the crabs also. The biotic factors can also affect the abiotic factors. It's a little harder to understand this part. So the living parts of an ecosystem can have an effect on the non-living parts. So the crabs, definitely, they pick up the seashells, they use them for their homes, they move them around. So the seashells are affected by the crab's behavior. The palm trees give the seagulls a place to hang out. So the living factors can also affect each other, as can the abiotic. So the wind can blow the sand around. So Everything can affect everything else. They all live in the same area, so they're all part of this ecosystem together. Okay? Organisms are found in certain ecosystems for a reason. There's a reason we don't have palm trees in Dallas, and that's because our soil, the ground or the soil that we have, isn't right for them, or the temperature or the humidity. They have sand and high humidity and high temperature by the coast, and so that's where they're going to grow. There's a reason we don't have tiger sharks in Dallas. It's because we don't have a saltwater environment for them to live. I mean, all of these things go together. We have the animals and the plants and the organisms in Dallas that we have because of the way our temperature, the way our soil, the way our, non-living environment affects them. So what you're going to find in Alaska is going to be very different than what you're going to find on the beach in Corpus Christi, because they have different non-living abiotic factors. So those things affect each other, okay? Also, in an area, for example, in Alaska, if there's a change in the abiotic factors, the biotic factors are going to adapt to that or move, okay? So for example, up by the North Pole, a lot of that polar ice that the polar bears hang out on is melting for various reasons for you to decide. They don't have that environment that they're used to, they're going to move. They're going to try to find somewhere else, or they're not going to be able to survive in that environment anymore. I know that armadillos here in Texas, they usually survive kind of down the southern part of Texas, San Antonio, down in there. And there's been a lot of people moving in and building houses and kind of driving them out of their habitat. So they have started moving further north where there's more room for them to live. I know when I was growing up in Kansas, we never saw armadillos, like ever. They were a story of, when my family would go visit Texas, they would see them. We never had armadillos in Kansas. And now that I'm grown, when I drive home to Kansas to visit, I see armadillos all the time. And that's them reacting to the non-living factors in their environment, which is the lack of space. So they have moved. Also, it's warm. It's getting hotter in our environment, so they're moving north because it's now warm enough in Kansas for them to survive. So organisms move and change and adapt to other organisms, to their non-living factors. Everything affects everything else, and it's all there on purpose, okay? The mix of biotic and abiotic factors are correct for its survival. If an organism cannot survive there because it doesn't have the right food or the right temperature or the right environment, it will either move, adapt, or die. So those are its choices. And it figures out how to make that happen, or it dies. So the polar bears right now are trying to find a place to live with less polar ice, or they're going to have to adapt to a warmer environment up by the North Pole. Polar bears, sorry. Lastly, there are different ways to organize ecosystems. So there are 4 levels, kind of like classification of ecosystems. And so if we're talking about an ecosystem, we can look at the whole thing, or we can look at a very small part of that area. So an ecosystem is everything in the area, biotic and abiotic. So everything that's living and everything that's non-living in an area. So if we look at our beach, it's the whole thing. It's everything that's alive, everything that's not alive in that space. Community is the next level down. It is all the living parts. So at this point, if we're looking at the community, we don't care about the temperature or the soil or the air. All we care about are those living things that live in that area, okay? The next level down is population. We're getting more specific. So this is all of a particular species in an area. So now we're not looking at everything that's alive. We're looking at one type of organism. So just the palm trees, or just the tiger sharks, or just the mosquitoes. Just one individual species. Now remember from the classification videos that species is very specific. So if we're talking about sharks for population, we don't mean all the sharks, we mean all the tiger sharks. So a very narrow, specific type, one type of organism, one type of species, okay? Then once we come down to the organism level, it's a very specific, so we're looking at one individual living thing. So that's never happened before. One tiger shark, or one palm tree, or one crab. So ecosystem is everything, living and non-living. Community is all the living stuff. Population is all of one species, so all the palm trees or all the tiger sharks or all the mosquitoes. And then organism is one individual, so one palm tree, one tiger shark, or one mosquito. So as we go from top to bottom, it gets smaller. So ecosystem is really big, community, population, and organism is just one. And there we have it, 6th grade science. Dismiss.